people are Arabs and they are surrounded by Arab countries where there are revolutions and have been revolutions such as in Yemen and Bahrain and Iraq and now in Syria and so on. So they are very affected by what's going on. They watch everything that happens around them. For the first time, actually, in the history of the Saudis, but in the whole world, the Arab people in general, they have a platform now, which is the social media. So now they follow up on what's going on publicly and openly because the regime cannot anymore censor all the information. So the impact is tremendous. They see that the Arab people are taken to the streets to get to overthrow absolute dictators like the Saudis, and some of them are even better than the Saudis, especially in social issues. So the impact is tremendous, and there have been many demonstrations since the beginning of the Arab uprising in 2010, especially among women. Driving is one of them, but also there are many women who are demonstrating all over the country in small groups, demanding the release of their imprisoned relatives who have been imprisoned by the Saudi regime for years without any judicial process. Of course, the Saudi system do not recognize modern judicial process. The Sharia law is what they use. So the impact is tremendous. The people are awakening, and they suffer from the same symptoms, or even worse symptoms, than the symptoms that draw millions of Arabs to the streets to get rid of their dictators.
Ali, the one thing that many people talk about, they think that most of the revolutions in the Arab countries occurred in countries that are republics as opposed to kingdoms. One analysis is that the kingdoms such as Saudi Arabia or UAE, which is an emirate, that these countries have money and they can afford to placate the people. However, but then there are countries like Jordan and Morocco, which seem to have survived up until now the Arab Spring. Do you think there is a reason why most of the revolutions occurred in republics as opposed to kingdoms or royal type of government in the Middle East?
Well, republics and codes, Arab style, they have probably less harsh security apparatus than absolute dictator regimes or monarchies who have been in power for centuries, some of them. But also there is traditions in the Arab world where people, especially the older generations, have some kind of loyalty to the kings that they have been ruling them. But you are right, the kingdoms, they have less revolutions, but that doesn't mean they are immune, or it doesn't mean that their people are happy with what's going on. I mean, there are demonstrations in Jordan and Morocco and everywhere else. The Saudis do have money, but there is the Kuwaitis. I mean, Kuwait is the biggest probably welfare state in the world, but the Kuwaiti people are demonstrating to minimize the power of the royal family. And Kuwait probably will be the first to go. And once one of them is gone, then the rest will follow. The Khalifa family in Bahrain is probably next or before Kuwait. So they are buying lots of loyalties. Same thing in Jordan and Morocco. They go to the top 1% or 2% of the people that they rule, and they pay them very well, and they give them power, and they put them in the military. And that's the case in monarchies. But that doesn't mean the monarchies are immune, and whether they have money or not, because the new generation of Arabs want more than money, and they want more than promises. They want more liberties. They want respect for human rights. They want better jobs. women in general, as you mentioned, in Saudi Arabia, are the lead in terms of demanding social changes in the country, but they are all over the world. Arab woman is probably the best hope for Arab liberation from their totalitarian regimes.
I'm going to focus on Saudi Arabia in a second, but I want to follow up on something you just said. You said that people want liberty, they want freedom, they want human rights. Now, I have heard debates going back and forth between experts who say that this is not about liberty, that this is an economic revolution. This is about the inequality of the distribution of wealth, that this is the actual spark. While others, such as you, is saying, no, this is about equality. Do you have any comments about this, whether that the revolution in the Arab world, not just Saudi Arabia, whether it's predominantly economic as opposed to about liberty and human rights?
You cannot separate the two. You can only have economic justice and social justice when you have modern and democratization of institutions, accountability, transparency, free press, freedom of expression, religious freedom. They all go together. Of course, many Arabs are hurting financially. The majority of them, except the rich few. Well, even in the rich areas like the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, there's about 40% who are living of the population who live under the United Nations poverty line. So the economic distribution cannot happen unless there are independent treasuries, the accountability, free press to hold legislative assemblies where they are accountable to the people instead of to the ruling families. So the two cannot be separated. I take what the Western, especially Washington analysts, with a grain of salt in terms of their knowledge of what's going on in the Arab world.
Well, okay, then I'll give you one more analysis that I usually hear from the Washington experts. One of the things that I hear repeated often is they say in countries like Saudi Arabia, where there's a substantial religious or the religious population or the religious establishment has substantial hold over the population, that if the monarchy was to go, that they would not necessarily be replaced with a democratic or open system, that to the contrary, it would be enough to an Islamic dictatorship which is even more cruel, or which is just very backward and gives the people less liberty and less freedom than the monarchy. What's your response to those experts?
As I told you, I take their analysis with tons of grains of sand, not salt, sand. Look, the religious establishment in Saudi Arabia is only a tool of the system. The mufti is appointed by the king and he is paid by the king. All of the religious councils are appointed by the king and they are only accountable to the king. The only power the religious establishments has in Saudi Arabia is the power that the royal family gives them. They are the front line for the system. They are the oppressor. They are the religious police. Their job has nothing to do with religion. It's spying on people. It's terrorizing people. It's religious enforcement. Saudi Arabia is the only country where people are physically forced to pray and to fast. There is no freedom of religion for anybody in Saudi Arabia. Religious establishments are tool of the regime, or establishment tool of the regime. How, in terms of this analysis, I have heard this, Kamal. I work in Washington, D.C. Incidentally, the center has been in business for 12 years, not 4 years.
Okay.
I network with people. I listen to them. I read what they say, and I attended their conferences. I attend their conferences constantly, and we actually are having a conference coming on this coming Tuesday to discuss all these issues. But it is only natural for people, Arab people and Muslim people, but Arab people, it is only natural that the transition from absolute religious and political totalitarianism, it's only natural. The next move will be to something that people are familiar with, and that's Islam and religion and the Sharia law. However, I wrote actually an article when the Egyptian revolution started, and I titled it "Thank You for Facebook," because the only big sign in Tahrir Square was a big sign, and it says exactly that. Thank you, Facebook. It doesn't say thank you, God, or thank you, Quran, or thank you, Sharia. So it is one thing that people can identify with, religion. However, the crux of my article was the sooner the religious establishment rule, the faster they go. And look what happened to the Muslim brothers. The minute they get to power, they did exactly the same thing that their predecessors did, which I found a stupid thing to do. And look where they are now. Same thing in Tunisia, same thing in Yemen, same thing in Bahrain, same thing in Libya, same thing wherever there are religious establishments. They have nothing to offer but the Sharia law, and people are fed up with the Sharia law. They want liberty, they want social freedom, they want pornography, they want...
Okay, all right. Well, let's talk about that. We'll focus on Saudi Arabia now. You said earlier, before I moved away from the topic, you said that you believe women are going to play a major role in the reformation of Saudi Arabia and their government. Now, I want you to expand about that, but I also want you to keep in mind the argument that Saudi women currently have very little power in the country, and if that's true, I don't know if it is, how can people, or half the population, which has, for the most part, who have been unemancipated and who have no political power, how can they influence political change in Saudi Arabia?
That's a very good question, Kamal. But unless you are totally focused in Saudi Arabia, like I am, totally focused exclusively in Saudi Arabia. But honestly, CDHR, our organization, is the only entity in the world that is totally focused in Saudi Arabia. The government policies, domestic and foreign policies, and all the issues you raised. You are absolutely right. Saudi women have been the most marginalized people on this planet for a long time. However, things are changing. 50% of the population are women. They have become very educated. Frankly speaking, some of them are much superior to men in colleges and high schools and everywhere else, and that's documented by the World Bank and other organizations. Women have changed because, again, they have access now to the internet and to the social media. They are communicating with each other and with the rest of the world. The most active people in Saudi Arabia against the religious establishment are actually Saudi women, because they are the victims of this religious terrorism in the country. So they are changing because they have access to information. About 40% of the Saudi population is below 13, 14 years of age,
Okay.
and 60% are below 20. 60% are below 25. This is a totally new generation of men and women who have no connection with the past traditions or religion. They may pray and they may, repeat what their parents or other people say, but they spend all their time on computer and cell phones and Facebook and Twitter and you name it. So because they have access to information, because they are educated, because they compare themselves with the rest of the world, especially women all over the world, but specifically women in their neighborhood, like even in the Gulf states, but beyond that. So they are demanding, they are, as you mentioned earlier, now taken to the streets more than men do to demand the right to drive, which is basic human right, mobility as demanded by modernity. So they are changing, and now because they are active in changing, you have to remember these women are daughters of some people, wives of some people, mothers of some people. So they are now attracting many support from many, many men in the media, even princes. I mean, Prince Walid, who was the multimillionaire prince, have come very. These are all documented. Anybody could Google what I'm telling you. Came out very strongly in favor of Saudi women driving for some, for basic practical reason. Saudi women are driven by foreign drivers. Many of them cannot afford to pay these people. So he argues that for practical reason they drive to save money and to keep the country economy going. And so there are some Saudi princes like Princess Basma, but Al-Walid bin Talal wife has come very strongly in favor of women driving, women's rights. And so they are changing. And one thing about the Arab traditions, if the women demonstrate, they may put them in jail, but they don't beat them. But if men demonstrate, they beat them and they throw them in prison. So they have that.
Let me stop you there. Let me stop you there for a second. So, in the United States during the civil rights movement, and even before, during the emancipation movement, where blacks were trying to see equality, when blacks were trying to seek equality, it wasn't just blacks alone who were fighting for equality. There were whites who joined them, who tried to help them. Ultimately, when there was a civil war between the United States, it was basically white people who also wanted to end slavery. And the reason I say that, do you think it would be necessary for men to join women in Saudi Arabia for women to be successful? In other words, that women alone would not be able to do it unless they convince others in Saudi society, in particular men, to join them.
Yes, the men are already joining, Kamal, as I mentioned earlier. Many men are now advocating the women's right, for example, to drive, but the women's right to go to work, to go to universities, to practice law. You have to understand the men have changed too. I mean, young generation, they are more interested in things that has nothing to do with religion and God and the king. They want some modern life and openness in society, and also they are realizing that the country cannot be built, society cannot be built and progress and move forward with only half of society. No country has ever done that. So there are many men who are joining, advocating the same thing that women are actually advocating, because they are realizing that without a united and progressive society, the country will remain very stagnant and remain under the control of these autocratic and theocratic men whose.
Okay, well, let me stop you there. You said earlier that members of the royal family are supporting women. You mentioned Prince Walid, and you mentioned I think the Princess Basma or another princess. And the question is, well, do you think rather than a revolution type change in Saudi Arabia,
favored some kind of reforms. They all think that they are the only one who have the right to rule the country by right of birth. That hasn't changed much actually. However, they are realizing that the walls are closing in on them because of what's happening in the Arab world, because of their population's demand, and because of the Saudi royal family dwindling regional international influence for many reasons, and that's what we are going to discuss Tuesday. But the thing is that they know the royal family. Many of them are educated people. They are not stupid. Many of them have lived in the West, went to schools in the West, and they know that if they don't change, they will be changed. There is no question about that. They don't sleep. They don't sleep very well this night because of all these pressures on them from their people, from the revolutions around them, and from the global community. So yeah, I mean they have no choice. Either they don't change or they will be changed. They know that.
Okay, well then, in the last probably 10 years or maybe even less, we had now three members of the royal family who passed away. We have King Fahd, we have Prince Sultan, and Prince Naib, who were, part of the main leaders of Saudi Arabia. Do you think now, with King Abdullah being in his mid-80s, going on to 90s, and even his crown prince, I think, is also in his 80s or late 70s, do you think that the coming generation of Saudi rulers may be more open naturally to these issues that you were talking about?
Yes, as I said, they have absolutely no choice. Come on, the whole world is changing. Their people are changing. The demands are rising, and they have either to change, maybe gradually, which I actually prefer gradual transformation of society, but tangible, timely transformation of society and institutions. That would be the best thing to do. My concern is, as you mentioned, some of these elderly princes they have been detached from reality all their lives, and they really cannot see the writing on the wall as clear as some of the young ones. The young ones are also competitive people. They have very little to connect them like their fathers. But, the 53 sons of King Abdul Aziz live under his roof and the tent, and they were accountable to their father, and the tradition and age system worked for them. But most of the young ones, they don't even know each other because there are so many of them. The few people who are in power, they do, but they are competing among themselves in a different way than their parents have been competing. So if they don't themselves realize that it's not anymore the way the situation is not anymore it used to be 30, 40, 50 years ago, they will start fighting among themselves. Probably the biggest fear now among many people is that the ruling family or the royals will start fighting among themselves, and that could create actually a more destructive environment than the mass revolution, because the country could get divided into regions.
But we've heard that before. We've heard that before after Fahd died.
No, you have not. No, you have not heard this before. No. The transitions have been very smooth. The successions have been very smooth until now, and it probably will. Even when King Abdullah, who is incoherent now, he's old and he's sick, and Prince Salman, as you mentioned, he's not feeling very good. He's old and he's also sick. But the point being is this: succession has been smooth until now, and maybe after King Abdullah has gone and Salman is gone, that's when you will see a lot of differences in terms of who is going to rule and how will the country be ruled.
Okay, just to clarify for the audience, Prince Salman, is what they call the
the second deputy minister is Prince Migrin, who is also in his 70s. There is a possibility, but it's unlikely it will happen. After Salman departure, he might become the king. At this point, there is a discussion, and I hear this from people who are reliable inside the country. There is now a possibility that the current interior minister, Prince Mohammed bin Naif, and King Abdullah's son Mut'ab, who is the head of the National Guard, there is a rumor, if you want to call it, that the two men will be the most powerful people after King Abdullah dies, or if he cannot rule anymore. And that could create problem. There are some of King Faisal, former King Faisal's son, like the former head of the intelligence and former ambassador to the US. So again, there is a discussion of who is going to get what after this 2 or 3 unhealthy and older men are gone. So there is
regardless of who might come. I mean, one of the arguments that been made is that one of the reasons that countries like Saudi Arabia, again, have been able to survive the Arab Spring is mere luck, in that the Arab Spring happened to occur at a time when oil revenues are sky high, the country is bringing in over $300 billion a year in revenue, so they were able to afford to spend on the population or to spend on economic projects to try to really improve the economy and employ people. Now, one of the other things, on another hand, that we're hearing constantly is the invention of something called fracking in the West, in particular the United States, where countries that have relied heavily on the Middle East for their oil are now able to extract more oil from their own land. The leaders, of course, of this are Canada and the United States. The United States last year was able to add 1 million barrels per day of oil output. So I recall that a couple of months ago, Prince Walid had complained or had raised the alarm that this extra influx of oil could seriously damage the Saudi economy. So the question is, do you think if this is true, where the economy is not as robust as it is today, that this could have an impact or speed up the change in Saudi Arabia?
of course, I think the Saudis realize that it's only a matter of time before other sources of oil, whether it is solar energy, gas, coal, and people are working very hard, because even if Saudi Arabia has the amount of oil that people are saying reserve, which nobody knows exactly, but oil is finite, it's commodity, it's going to go, and the civilization has to continue. So people are looking for other alternatives. But there are many oil sources now that come to the market. Iraq, for example, once it's stabilized, it's estimated that it has as much oil reserve as Saudi Arabia. Recently, there is an area in Australia that has about the same in Australia now, the same amount of oil as Saudi Arabia. But there have been other sources. The United States have been producing a lot of gas and other sources.
So the question is,
there is another very important point here, Kamal. In 10 years, the Saudis themselves will be consuming about 9 million barrels a day within the country, because of the increase in population, and industrialization and lifestyle. So they may not be able to even export more than 3 million instead of 10 million barrels a day now. So the Saudis are on hot water, and one can we hope they are trying to do something to avoid real destructive violence in the country, which I don't see at this point. So
Okay, well, you mentioned earlier we're coming towards the end of our show. We can go on with this for a long time. I'm going to ask you, I'm going to leave it with this. Do you feel optimistic that there will be actual change in Saudi Arabia in the coming years? Or do you think the families will resist change and cause chaos in the country?
I feel very optimistic about the whole Middle East, despite all these problems and killings and murders. This is the first time, come on, this is the first time in Arab history where you have the Arab people looking in and trying to fix their homegrown problem instead of blaming it on colonialism and Zionism and other foreign, forces. Arabs now are taking charge of their lives. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be smooth, but they are going in the right directions, whether in Saudi Arabia or any part of the Middle East.
Okay, but you mentioned a good point that will end with this. Those countries who have not had an Arab Spring yet, like Saudi Arabia, like UAE, like Qatar, like Kuwait, I'm sure the people of those countries must be looking at places like Egypt and Syria and Libya and Tunisia and Yemen and seeing that it's not going smoothly at all. It has that these revolutions have not produced what people wanted. Do you think that the result of the revolutions in the Arab Spring will scare away future movements in other countries of following in the same footsteps?
No, I don't. First of all, the Arab Gulf states and their rulers are responsible for creating most of the chaos you mentioned because they want to convince their people. Look what's happening next door. But Arabs are intelligent, more smart than Washington analysts and others seem to give them a credit for. The change the people are looking for, and Arabs not look any revolutions, any mass revolutions, including the United States, Spain, France, Mexico, anywhere in the world, China. It takes years and years and years. The easiest part of it is to get rid of a dictator. And then all these differences that have been buried by these dictators, like in Yugoslavia, they surface. And then people will start dealing with those differences. And it's going to go up and down and sideways. But what's happening in the Arab world is irreversible, it is unstoppable, and it can only go forward. It is in the best interest of the Arab people.
Okay, we have one question from Carla Porter, who's listening in on the show. And she has a general question. She says, what can the average Saudi citizen do to help affect cultural change? I don't know if you want to take a crack at that question.
The individual citizen is doing what they are supposed to do at this point. They are discussing their issues in a way that they have never been able to do. They are discussing the role of religion. They are discussing the role of women. They are discussing the exploitation of their wealth. And some of them are taking to the streets. Some of them are writing. And there are many, many activities that happen in Saudi Arabia every single day that you never heard of because the Western media are not taking these issues seriously because the Saudis have tremendous influence, especially in Washington, D.C. Saudi people are working very hard under very difficult conditions. Saudi Arabia is an absolute monarchy. There is absolutely no freedom of expression of any kind. So under those conditions, the Saudi people are trying to do what they can.
Okay, well, so basically you're saying the average Saudi citizen is doing what he needs to do at this point. And
having thank you for having me, Kamal, and appreciate that very much. We are having a conference this coming Tuesday at 10:30 and 112 16th Street, Suite 600. And it is going to be discussed by very well-informed people, including former U.S. Colonel in the Air Force who spent a lot of time in Saudi Arabia, former CIA, and former White House employee. It will be very informative. It will be discussion that's open because we didn't tell anybody anything. It will be honest, frank, and unabashed discussion. So I encourage viewers to those who can